Hi, my name is Everett. Today I am reading Leprechaun in Late Winter by Mary Pope Osborne. Chapter 1, A Beautiful Word. It was a chilly afternoon in late winter. Annie was doing her homework on the computer in the living room. Jack sat on the couch and stared at a blank page in a small notebook. He heaved a sigh. "What's wrong?" said Annie. "I have to write a story for school," said Jack, "and I'm stuck." "Well, you better get unstuck," said Annie. "Mom and Dad said we have to get our homework done before we go to the theater with them tonight." "I know," said Jack, "but I can't think of anything to write about." "Why don't you do what you love to do?" said Annie. "Go outside and write some facts about what you see, then turn them into a story." "Hey, that's a good idea," said Jack. "Thanks." He jumped up and grabbed his coat from the hall closet. Then, taking his pencil and notebook with him, he headed outdoors. The early March weather was sunny but cold and windy. Jack looked around. Then he wrote down some facts in his notebook. Old snow in yard, sun sparkling on sidewalk. Jack looked up again. Treetops swayed in the March winds. Jack started to write about them, but when he looked down at his notebook, he nearly dropped his pencil. On the page were two large, fancy letters, T.K. "Oh, man," whispered Jack. He dashed into the house and into the living room. "Annie, look!" Jack held up his notebook. "Look at this." And he stared at the page. "Old snow, sun sparkling. Nice." "No, not that," said Jack. "The letters." And he looked at Jack like he was a little crazy. What letters?" she said. Jack looked back at the page. "They're gone," he said. "A big fancy T and K." "T and K?" said Annie. "Yes, for Teddy and Kathleen," said Jack. "The letters just appeared on my page when I was outside." "They were there, really?" "I believe you," said Annie. She jumped up from the computer. "Let's go." "Wait, I have to get my backpack from upstairs," said Jack. "Forget it. Come on. The chairs must be waiting for us," said Annie. Okay, said Jack. He quickly shoved his notebook and pencil into a pocket of his coat, and he grabbed her jacket. "Mom, Dad, we're going to take a little break from our homework," she called. "Okay, but make it short. We have to leave for the theater by 7, their dad called from the kitchen. "We will," said Jack. Jack and Annie headed outside. They ran over the melting snow and in the front yard and up the sun-sparkling sidewalk. They charged across the street and into the Frog Creek woods. They hurried between the wind-blown trees until they came to the tallest oak. Behind the branches was the magic treehouse. Their friends from Camelot, Teddy and Kathleen, were looking out the window. "Hello," called Kathleen. "Hi," said Annie, waving. "Good trick with the magic letters," Jack called. "We thought you might like that," said Teddy. "I just learned how to do it." Annie grabbed the rope ladder and started up. Jack followed her. They climbed into the treehouse and hugged their two young enchanters. "So what's up today?" asked Jack. "Where does Merlin want us to go now?" asked Annie. "Merlin wants you to go to Galway, Ireland," said Kathleen. "Ireland? Cool," said Annie. "Morgan sent us to Ireland once before, to the 9th century, said Jack. "Yes, well, this time you'll go to Ireland in the 19th century, said Teddy. To 1862, to be exact. Your mission is to find an imaginative and creative girl named Augusta. Augusta doesn't know yet what her talents are, said Kathleen. She lives in a time when it is not easy for girls to explore their captivity. Your mission will be to inspire her so she can give her gifts to the world. What does that mean exactly? Asked Annie. Inspire. "'Tis a beautiful word, said Kathleen, her sea blue eyes shining. It means to breathe life into a person's heart, to make her feel joyful and to be alive. That is beautiful, said Annie. You may need some magic help to help you, said Teddy. From the corner of the treehouse he picked up the magic trumpet that helped them on their last journey. Only this time, Teddy handed the trumpet to Kathleen. She held the shiny brass instrument for a moment, then she tossed it into the air. The trumpet spun like a whirlwind. There was a flash of blue light, and the trumpet was gone. In its place was a thin silver pipe with 6 holes. "What's that?" breathed Jack. "An Irish whistle," said Kathleen. She plucked the instrument from the air. "When you face great danger, one of you must play it. It will make magical music, and anything the other sings will come true. But remember," said Teddy, "his magic will only work once." "Right," said Annie. "Thanks," said Jack. He took the Irish whistle from Kathleen and put it into his pocket. "And did Morgan send us a research book to give us information?" Not this time, said Teddy. We're going to want you to draw upon your own experiences in life to help you on your journey. No problem, said Annie. Jack wasn't sure about that. He liked having a book of facts to help them. So how do we find Augusta, said Annie. It should be easy to find her, said Teddy. When you land in the county of Galway, Ireland, just ask someone to direct you to the big house. Hold on, Jack pulled out his notebook and wrote, County of Galway, Ireland, Augusta, big house. Got it, said Jack. But how do we get to Ireland in the first place if we don't have a research book? Point to the notes you just made and make it your wish, said Kathleen. And when you are ready to come home, said Teddy, use the Pennsylvania book as you usually do. Got it, said Jack. Go now and help Augusta, said Kathleen. She needs you. Jack pointed to the words Galway, Ireland in the notebook. I wish we could go there, he said. Bye, and he said to Teddy and Kathleen. Farewell, said Kathleen. Good luck, said Teddy. The wind started to blow. The trio started to spin. It spun faster and faster, then everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 2. The Big House. A cold wind blew and ran into the treehouse. Jack shivered. He was wearing an old overcoat and ragged trousers, and he wore a scarf, a shawl, and a long red wool dress. They both wore scuffed, worn boots. So where are we? Said Jack. He and Annie looked out the window. The treehouse had landed in a tree at the edge of a green meadow dotted with woolly white sheep. Next to the meadow was a narrow lane that ran uphill between low stone walls. Through the drizzle, Jack could see mist-covered mountains in the distance and a flash of silver sea. It looks like a scene in a fairy tale, said Annie. Yeah, a fairy tale with bad weather, said Jack. I wonder where the big house is, said Annie. I don't know, but I'd like to get inside it now, said Jack. Me too, said Annie, shivering. Let's go. Jack rammed his cold hands into his pockets of his torn coat. In one pocket he felt his notebook and pencil. In the other he felt the Irish whistle. I've got everything, he said. Good, said Annie. She held her red skirt and started down the rope ladder. Jack climbed down after her, and he pulled her shawl tightly around her shoulders. Jack turned up the collar of his coat. As they tramped through the wet meadow, he felt cold water seeping through the holes in his boots. And he climbed over a stone wall onto the muddy lane. A horse-drawn wagon was rattling toward them down the hill. The wagon was filled with squealing pigs. Excuse me, Annie called to the driver. Can you tell us where the big house is? An old man with a tired, rugged face pointed back up the hill. Thanks, said Jack. The large wooden wheels of the wagon rumbled past, splashing Jack and Annie with mud. Yuck, said Annie. Now we're cold and wet and dirty, said Jack. Yeah, we're going to look great when we get to the big house, said Annie. So what do we do when we get there? Asked Jack. When we find Augusta, maybe we'll tell her that Teddy and Kathleen sent us, said Annie. Like we told Louis Armstrong in New Orleans. Just thinking about their adventures with Louis Armstrong made Jack smile. I don't know if that will work, he said. His world seems so different from this world. There it was so noisy and busy. Here it feels lonely. Well, we won't know until we find Augusta, said Annie. Let's go. Jack and Annie lowered their heads. They plodded up the lane, sloshing in and out of giant puddles. When they reached the top of the hill, they stopped. The muddy lane wound down past the moored sheep meadows and some cottages, past a long stable and several barns. At the end of the lane was a large open gate that led onto the grounds of the white mansion. Gray smoke rose from the mansion's chimneys. The big house, said Annie. Maybe people who live there will invite us inside to get warm and dry by a fire, said Jack. Jack and Annie started down the lane. As they passed the sheep meadows, black and white dogs barked at them. When they walked up by several boys hauling wet hay, the workers looked up and eyed them suspiciously. Jack was relieved to get in the gate and head toward the big house. When they reached the front door, Annie lifted the heavy knocker and let it drop. A moment later, the door opened. A pale teenage girl looked out. Who are you? Why are you here? Oh, well, started Jack. Are you the ones the butler sent for? The girl asked. The butler, said Jack. Yes, we are, said Annie. Then you should go around the back, the girl said. Before Jack and Annie could ask for Augusta, the girl slammed the door in their faces. Nice, said Jack. I hope she wasn't Augusta, said Annie. Why did you tell her yes? Asked Jack. It's a way to get inside the big house, said Annie. Come on. Jack and Annie tramped through the mud to the back of the mansion. They stopped at a door beneath a large smoky chimney. Annie knocked again. This time a young red-haired girl in a cape and apron opened the door. Yes, she said. Is your name? Started Annie. Who is it, Molly? Someone called from inside. Molly? So she's not Augusta, thought Jack. Who are you? Molly asked them. We're the ones the butler sent for, said Annie. You? Molly said. She looked doubtful. Well, come in and see him then. Jack and Annie stepped inside. He's in the kitchen, said Molly. She started down the hall. Jack and Annie followed Molly to the doorway of a dimly lit kitchen. The kitchen smelled of fish and onions. Pots and pans hung over a long rack over a big wooden table. A stout older woman was bent over the table rolling out dough. Cook, here are the ones the butler sent for, said Molly. The cook looked up from her dough and squinted at Jack and Annie. You're the ones she sent for, she said. Yes, ma'am. That's us, said Annie. The cook turned toward the fireplace. Next to the fireplace was an ancient-looking man with white whiskers, sat lumped in a chair snoring. Mr. O'Leary, the old man jerked open his eyes. The ones you sent for are here, the cook shouted as if the man were hard of hearing. The groggy butler peered at Jack and Annie. I sent for you, he growled. Not possible. I sent for a coach driver and a blacksmith. Really, said Annie? I guess there was a mistake. But maybe there's some other jobs we could do around here. Well, what are you good for? Asked the butler. What do you mean? Said Jack. Do you know how to sweep the inside of a chimney? The old man asked. No, said Jack. Pluck a chicken? The cook asked. No way, said Annie. What about rats? The butler asked. What about them? Asked Jack. They're all over the cellar, said the cook. Can you catch them? I don't think so, said Jack. Then you're no good to us here, snorted the butler. Be on your way. At that moment, Jack heard the back door open and shut. A girl about Jack's age stepped into the kitchen. She wore a red cape and carried 2 large empty baskets. Her wet hair was parted neatly down the middle and pulled into a tight bun in the back. Ah, said the cook. Welcome back, Miss Augusta. Chapter 3, Miss Augusta. Jack and Annie looked at each other. Augusta. The girl put down her baskets and took off her wet cape. Did you deliver your cakes to the poor, Miss Augusta? Asked Molly. Yes, Molly, said Augusta. I visited 7 cottages today. 7? In this weather? You're an angel, Miss Augusta, said Molly. Always so kind to the poor. It is my duty, Molly, the girl said, to help those less fortunate than myself. Her gaze rested on Jack and Annie. And who are these poor children? They're looking for work, Miss Augusta, said the cook. But I'm afraid they're sorry creatures, not good for anything. I was just about to send them away. Oh, surely we must not turn them out so quickly, cook, said Augusta. How tired and miserable they look. Jack didn't think they looked bad. We are tired and miserable, Annie said. Her voice sounded sad. Her shoulders sagged. Oh, brother, Jack thought. Annie was really acting her part. My poor dears, you must both come into the parlor and rest a bit, said Augusta. We would like that, Annie said pitifully. Follow me, said Augusta. Miss Augusta, surely you're not taking those dirty children into the parlor, said the cook. We must be kind to the poor, cook, no matter how dirty they are, said Augusta. We should give them something to drink if they are thirsty and something to eat if they are hungry. You are too kind, Miss Augusta, said Molly, shaking her head. We'll at least make them take off the filthy boots, said the cook. Jack and Annie pulled off their boots and socks and then set them by the door. Their feet were red and locked and raw looking. Augusta took 2 peeled potatoes from a bowl and put them in her pocket. Then she picked up a lit candle from the hearth. Come, let me take you to the parlor, she said to Jack and Annie. Thanks, Augusta, said Annie. Show some respect, the cook called her after Annie. Call her Miss Augusta. Sorry, said Annie. Thanks, Miss Augusta. Jack rolled his eyes. Why should they call her Miss? Augusta didn't look like she was any older than he was. Holding her flickering candle, Augusta led Jack and Annie out of the kitchen. The wooden floor creaked as they walked barefoot through a narrow hallway. How are we ever going to inspire this strange, serious girl? Wondered Jack. She acts as if she's already a grown-up and treats Jack and Annie and me like babies. Well, sit in here, children, said Augusta. She directed Jack and Annie into a large room with heavy curtains and dark furniture. The pale teenage girl who had answered the front door sat on the sofa knitting. Another teenage girl knitted beside her. They scowled as they saw Jack and Annie. What are you doing here, Augusta? Asked the pale girl. Why are you bringing those two into the parlor? I invited them to tea, Gertrude, said Augusta. She turned to Jack and Annie. Pay no attention to my sisters, she said. Please, sit down. Augusta, you have gone mad, said Gertrude. You cannot invite these two ragamuffins to sit in here. Mother will be furious, said Augusta's other sister. They're filthy. They're not even wearing shoes. Jack looked down at his muddy clothes and cold red feet. Could have made them remove the muddy shoes in the kitchen, Elijah, Augusta said. I only wish I had nice dry clothes to give them. Sit down, children, she said to Jack and Annie again. Jack and Annie slowly sat down. They're going to get into trouble, Augusta, said Gertrude. Mother will never approve, said Elijah. Both sisters shook their heads as they went back to their knitting. Augusta ignored her sisters and walked to the silver teapot on the sideboard. Would you like some hot tea, my poor dear? She asked Jack and Annie. Yes, Miss Augusta, said Annie. Jack nodded. Hot tea sounded good. He still felt chill from the cold wind and rain. There was a fireplace in the dreary parlor, but no fire was lit. Everything in the room seemed dark and gloomy, except for a few books on a table. As Augusta poured tea into fancy china cups, Jack leaned closer to get a good look at the books. One was titled The Plays of William Shakespeare, another was called The Tales of King Arthur. Jack smiled at himself. Seeing those book titles made him feel like a little more comfortable. Augusta carried cups of tea to Jack and Annie. Then she pulled the potatoes out of her pocket and gave them each one. Thank you, Miss Augusta, said Annie. Jack took a sip of the tea, but it was too bitter and too hot to drink. He took a bite of his cold potato, but it was too hard to chew. So, Miss Augusta, what do you like to do around here? Asked Annie. What inspires you? Augusta looked puzzled. I just don't know what that means, she said. What about reading books, said Jack. Have you ever read those ones? He pointed to the tales of King Arthur and the plays of William Shakespeare. Those are books that belong to my brothers, said Augusta. The time has not come for Augusta to read such books, said her sister Gertrude. Not until she is older, said her sister Elijah. Why? Asked Jack. Mother says the tale of King Arthur and the plays of William Shakespeare are not for young ladies, said Augusta. Really, said Jack. Yes, but I am afraid I sometimes peek at my brother's books, Augusta said to Jack and Annie in a low voice. I love stories. I remember every story I read or hear. I love stories too, said Annie, and I love books. The two older sisters smiled. Keep striving, my dear, said Elijah. Perhaps one day you will learn to read. I already know how to read, said Annie. Jack and I read lots of books. She pointed to the table on the books on the table. In fact, we know tons of King Arthur. In fact, we know tons about King Arthur, and we go see plays by William Shakespeare with our parents. And one time we even acted in a play by William Shakespeare, A Midsummer Night's Dream. It was at our school. Jack broke in before Annie could tell him that she and Jack had actually met Shakespeare himself. A Midsummer Night's Dream, said Augusta. She looked surprised. Don't listen to them, Augusta, said Gertrude. I doubt these children have ever been to school, much less acted in a play by William Shakespeare. I suspect that you are quite right, Gertrude, someone said. A tall woman was standing in the doorway of the parlor. She wore a long black velvet dress and stood very straight. There was an icy look on her face as she stared at Jack and Annie. Oh, Mother, said Elijah. Chapter 4. What are you good for? Hi there, Annie said cheerfully. Augusta's mother did not reply. She was staring at Jack's bare feet. Her expression made him sink down in his chair. Do not blame Elizabeth or me, Mother, said Gertrude. These are Augusta's friends, not ours. I took pity on them, Mother, said Augusta. They were wet and miserable. Her mother finally smiled. Yes, daughter, I imagine they were. It's very nice to have pity for the poor, but dirty children should not be sitting in our parlor. They were hungry, Mother, said Augusta. Yes, and I see you have given them food, said her mother, so it is time to take them out of the house now. Jack and Annie stood up. Jack was happy to leave. He felt like Augusta and her mother were talking about stray dogs or cats, but Augusta sat very still and just stared at her mother. Go on, get them out of here, Augusta, said Gertrude. They're not clean. They might even have bugs in their hairs. The mere mention of bugs made Jack's skull pitch. He and Annie both scratched their heads. See, said Gertrude. Augusta, her mother said in a stern voice. Oh, all right, said Augusta, standing up. I was trying to be kind. Come with me, please, she said to Jack and Annie. I'll lead you down the lane a bit, at least past the sheepdogs. As Augusta started out of the room, her mother stopped her and pinched her shoulders. Carry yourself straighter, daughter, she said. Jack couldn't imagine how a girl could carry herself any straighter. Augusta led Jack and Annie back down the dark hallway, through the fish-smelling kitchen, past the ancient butler, sleeping by the fire, and the kitchen maids and the cook. Without a word, she grabbed her red cape and put it around her neck. Where are you going, Miss Augusta? Asked Molly. I have been ordered to send these poor children back out into the storm, said Augusta. Jack and Annie forced their feet into their stiff, wet socks and boots. Augusta held the door for them and followed them outside, slamming the door behind her shut. Even though it was still rainy and windy, Jack felt much happier outside the big house than inside. He and Annie followed Augusta past the gates and out of the lane. Augusta walked stiffly, leading them like a mother duck. What are we going to do about it? Annie whispered to Jack. I don't know, whispered Jack. She doesn't seem very creative or imaginative to me. Well, we have to inspire her. Come on, said Annie. She and Jack hurried to catch up with Augusta. Miss Augusta, Annie called, walking alongside her. Do you like to sing, dance, paint, play musical instruments, anything creative like that? No, said Augusta. She sounded angry. Jack figured that she must be mad at her mother for kicking them out of the big house. Well, what about nature? Said Annie. What about it? Asked Augusta. Walking in the woods, said Annie. Trees, birds. Does anything like that inspire you? Not anymore. I was close to nature once, said Augusta. I used to roam the woods with my younger brothers. They said I was like a robin with the eye of a hawk. I knew where to find the caves of the otters. I knew where to find the nests of wild birds. That's so cool, said Annie. I knew where the deer lay down to sleep, said Augusta. I knew the names of every tree. Oak, beech, elm, hazel, larch, pine. Augusta's voice grew a little bit wobbly as if she might cry. But I'm not allowed to roam the woods with my brothers anymore. Mother says it's not proper for a young lady. That's so sad, said Annie. Never mind, said Augusta, lifting her chin. Let's not talk about me anymore. Let us try instead to help the two of you. Cook said you were not good for anything. What would she say that? Why would she say that? They asked us if we were good for cleaning chimneys, plucking chickens, or catching rats, said Annie, and we said no. Then you must find another way to make yourselves useful, said Augusta, or you will never find your way in the world. Can you shear sheep? We've never tried, said Jack. Milk cows, churn butter, weave a shawl, Augusta said impatiently. Hunt rabbits with hounds. Oh, never that, said Annie. Jack laughed. Augusta frowned. This is nothing to laugh about. Every day you must ask yourself, what am I good for? Actually, that was a good question, Jack thought. What was he good for? And I would like to give you a farther piece of advice, said Augusta. Never make up stories about yourselves that aren't true. What do you mean? Said Jack. You never acted in a play by William Shakespeare's, did you? Tell the truth. Now, said Augusta. We did, said Jack. My sister was telling the truth. We were both in a Midsummer Night's Dream. We played Wood Fairies, said Annie. We had green costumes, and Jack gave a little speech, and I danced and sang. Augusta shook her head. You poor dear, she said. I know you only make up these wild stories because your real lives are so miserable, but... Wait a minute, stop, said Jack. What's wrong with you? Why do you act so snobby? Snobby? Me? Augusta looked confused. Jack, said Annie. No, I'm serious, Jack said to Annie. She thinks she's better than us. No, I don't, Augusta said, stunned. I'm not like that at all. Each day I walk several miles to town to give cakes and clothes to poor children like yourselves. That's nice, said Jack, but you think you're better than those poor children, don't you? You never want to be real friends with them. Would you? Why? What you say about me is not true, Augusta said to Jack. I love the poor. My favorite friend in all the world is quite poor and has never been to school. Some say she's even a little cracked in the head, but I love her dearly. Who's that? Asked Danny. Mary Sheridan. Our old nursemaid, said Augusta. I'll take you to meet her. Mary will tell you the truth about me. Come along. Augusta ran from the lane and across the muddy grass, her red cape flying in the wind. I don't think you inspired her, said Danny. I know, I'm sorry, said Jack. I just couldn't take her attitude any longer. Well, get over it, said Danny. We're supposed to help her, not annoy her. She was not annoying me, said Jack. Yeah, I know, said Danny. Me too, but we've got a mission. Come on. Jack and Annie followed Augusta across the grass to a small white cottage with a straw roof. Augusta banged on the doors, scaring away birds eating crumbs by the front steps. Mary, it's me, Augusta, she called. Come in, my dear, a voice answered. Augusta lifted the latch and led Jack and Annie inside. Wrapped in a brown shawl, Mary Sheridan was stroking an orange cat by an open fire. She had ragged white hair and bright blue eyes. Her crooked smile revealed a few missing teeth. Oh, 1 in 21 welcomes on the wonderful winter day, said the old woman. Chapter 5. A Fireside Tale. Hello, Mary, said Augusta. She kissed the old woman on her wrinkled cheek. With the firelight on her face, Mary seemed to glow. Her warm, snug cottage was the opposite of the big house. It smelled of damp leaves and moss, bread and chocolate. Firelight danced on the earthen floor and stone walls. Rain dripped through the roof, pinging onto a couple of tin buckets. And who do we have, Miss Augusta? Mary asked. 2 poor children from town, said Augusta. I want you to tell them about me, how I truly love the poor and try to help them. Mary smiled. Please, sit down first, she said. Jack and Annie and Augusta sat down on 3 rickety wooden chairs. Would you children like some hot cocoa? Mary asked. Jack and Annie nodded eagerly. Yes, please, Mary, said Augusta. But would you tell them? Yes, I will tell them about you, said Mary. She picked up a pot sitting on the hearth. She poured steaming cocoa into 3 mugs and handed them to Jack, Annie, and Augusta. The cocoa smelled delicious. Jack took a sip and licked his lips. Yum, he said. His insides felt warm for the first time all day. Now, Mary, said Augusta. In time, my child, Mary said to Augusta. Tell me, what have you been doing today? I delivered cakes in town, Augusta said proudly. When I found these poor children in our kitchen, looking for work. I've tried to help them, but they say I'm snobby. I brought them here so you could tell them the truth about me. Ah, I see, Miss Augusta. How do you try to help them? Said Mary. I tried to discover what they're good for, said Augusta, but it appears they are not good for anything. Really? Mary fixed her twinkling eyes on Jack and Annie. Well, let us start with this, children. Tell me something you like to do. No, wait. What do you love to do? Well, I love to read, said Jack. And write, said Annie. Read and write, said Augusta. I don't think so. Mary ignored Augusta and kept looking at Jack and Annie. What do you like to read and write? Asked Mary. Facts mostly, said Jack. True stories. Jack writes facts down all the time, said Annie. Honestly, Mary, said Augusta. Soon they'll be telling you that they were actors, too, and have performed in a play by William Shakespeare. Can we talk about me now? Actually, that's true, Jack said to Mary. We were in A Midsummer Night's Dream. Annie and I were fairies. I had stage fright, but, well, William Shakespeare himself, said Annie. He helped me get over it, said Jack. He looked straight at Augusta. Augusta rolled her eyes. Will was so nice, said Annie. And smart, said Jack. Of course he was, said Mary. You can tell that from his stories. Oh, please, stop. Don't tell Mary those ridiculous things, said Augusta. What about me, Mary? Wait, child, I have a question for them, Mary said. She leaned forward and spoke in a whisper. Where is Summer? Can you answer that? Mary's question doesn't make sense, Jack thought. I don't know. Do you know where Summer is, Mary? Asked Annie. Summer is hiding with the she, said Mary, laughing. The she? What's that? Said Annie. Surely you must know about the she, said Mary. That's what we Irish call our fairies. In the winter, the she steal all the warmth and sunshine, leaving us to suffer with cold and rain. Annie laughed too. So you've played the parts of fairies in a play by Shakespeare, said Mary. They're just like our she. Have you seen the she here in Ireland? Mary, Augusta said impatiently. Not yet, said Annie. That's a shame, said Mary. I have seen them. This is a true story. She looked at Jack and smiled. With facts. You might want to write them down. Oh, sure, said Jack. He pulled out the notebook and pencil out of his pocket. Augusta looked surprised. Mary leaned close to Jack and Annie again. Her eyes were shining and her voice was hushed. One day, long ago, a lonely girl took a walk in an old forest, said Mary. All was still, until joyful music began coming from a hidden world. Jack loved Mary's way of telling the story. He wrote down, Old forest, all still, joyful music, hidden world. Augusta frowned. So I guess you can write, she muttered. Suddenly there became a spinning wind, said Mary, and a cloud so bright and a beam of light poured over a river. Jack quickly wrote, spinning wind, bright cloud, beam of light river. Then they came, rumbling and thundering, exclaimed Mary. Mary, said Augusta. She sounded impatient, but Mary kept talking. Some with wings, some on horses of light, kings and queens in robes and gowns, the colors of summer, fall, winter, and spring. Jack wrote, some with wings, white horses, queens, kings. They galloped in a circle of blinding light, said Mary. They swept up the lonely girl and carried her across the river to the secret hollow hill. Had she gone inside, she would have become very small and seen many wondrous sights. Jack wrote, take lonely girl, hollow hill of she, wondrous sights. Jack looked up from his notebook, waiting for Mary to go on, but when she spoke, her voice was very soft. But the girl grew afraid and ran home instead. Mary sat back in her chair and closed her eyes. The only sound in the cottage was the crackling of the fire and the pinging of the rain into the tin buckets. Mary, Annie said softly, are you the girl in the story? Mary opened her eyes. I will never tell, she said. Oh, Mary, said Augusta, such tales. She turned to Jack and Annie. Mary still believes in the impossible. I do, I surely do, said Mary. Every night I leave a bit of milk on my windowsill for the she. I leave crumbs at my door. They eat them, too. Mary, the birds eat the crumbs, said Augusta. Yes, the birds are hungry also, said Mary, but the sheep pick over the crumbs first. At twilight, they steal across the river from their hidden hollow hills. Just as the old fishermen of County Galway, asked the farmers and nursemaids. Augusta shook her head sadly. Mary, only simple-minded folk still believe in such things, she said. Educated people know that is true and what is true and what is not. No, child, said Mary. They only know what they think is true. Augusta straightened her shoulders. Well, we should be going now, Mary, she said. So, could you please tell these children the truth about me now? Yes, said Mary. She turned to Jack and Annie. Do you children have names? Jack smiled. That was the first time today anyone had asked them their names. Yes, our names are Jack and Annie, said Annie. Well, Jack and Annie, thank you for coming to visit me today. I can tell that you are very special, said Mary. What about me, Mary? Augusta asked. Am I special? Yes, child, you are special, said Mary. She turned to Jack and Annie. Augusta is special too, but in a different way. How am I different, Mary? Asked Augusta. You try very, very hard to be good, and you are very smart, but you... Mary stopped. What, Mary? I what? Said Augusta. You are not happy, said Mary, and that breaks my heart. Augusta's eyes filled with tears. Oh, Augusta, don't cry, said Annie. She reached out to take Augusta's hand, but the girl stepped back. Augusta wiped her eyes. That's silly. I'm happy enough. I know I've never seen the she, and I never will, but I don't care anymore. And if you like these miserable children more than me, Mary, well, that's fine. Augusta ran to the door and opened it. The damp air swept inside as she rushed out of the cottage. Through the open doorway, Jack and Annie could see Augusta's red cape flying behind her. Chapter 6, A Late Winter's Daydream. Jack sighed. The mission really seemed hopeless now. We'd better find her, said Annie. She won't go far, said Mary. My poor Augusta. She has a fine mind and a brave heart, but she is so unhappy. Why is she so unhappy, Mary? Asked Annie. Yeah, what is her problem, said Jack. More than any of her brothers and sisters, Miss Augusta loves my stories, said Mary. Remembered them, every one of them. She did. Really, said Jack. Yes, she would repeat them back to me, word for word, said Mary. That's amazing, said Annie. She loved the story so much that she grew desperate to see the sheep for herself, said Mary. At night she would carry a lantern across the fields calling for them. By day she poked and prodded every part of the farm. Why, she even used a magnifying glass going through the earth for tiny footprints. But I'm afraid she never found them. Why, said Annie. Mary sighed. Because she looked for them with her head and not her heart, she said. Eventually she gave up and stopped searching. She didn't even want to hear the stories anymore. She's been a doubtful but sorrowful child ever since. That's terrible, said Annie. What can we do to help her? There's only one thing you can do, said Mary. What? Breathed Jack. Mary leaned forward in her chair. Her blue eyes seemed to stare right through Jack and Annie. You must show her the magic, she said. What? Thought Jack. Does Mary know about the magic tree house? What do you mean? He said. I know that you children are like me. You see things that others don't, said Mary. Help Augusta see them too. Help her find the magic in the fields and the forests. For a moment, Jack and Annie didn't say anything. The wind blew through the open door. The fire crackled. Then Annie took a deep breath. Okay, she said. We know exactly what to do. We do, said Jack. Yep, we'll talk about it outside, said Annie. Thanks, Mary. We'll find Augusta and take care of everything. Jack and Annie stood up to go. 1 and 20 fare thee well on this wonderful winter day, said Mary. 1 and 20 to you too, said Jack. Then he and Annie left the cozy cottage, scattering the birds by the front door. It had warmed up a little outside. The rain had stopped, but the fog still hung heavily over the sheep fields. The ground was soggy with mud. Jack could barely make out Augusta's red cape through the fog. She was across the lane, sitting on a stone wall at the edge of the sheep meadow. Mary was right. She didn't go far, said Annie. So how do we show her the magic, Annie? Easy, said Annie. We play our magic whistle. No, we can't do that, said Jack. We're supposed to save our whistle for a moment of great danger. That moment is now, said Annie. Come on. Hold on, said Jack. What great danger are we facing now? Not us, Augusta, said Annie. She's facing the great danger of losing all hope and happiness, and being bored and sad for the rest of her life, and never being inspired and never sharing the gifts with the world. It's almost too late already. Okay, said Jack. But are we just going to go up to her and start blowing the whistle and singing? That seems pretty weird. Yeah, it does, said Annie. How about this, said Jack. We'll tell Augusta that we want to put on a play for her. A play, said Annie. Yep, said Jack. We can tell her that we want to prove that we weren't lying that we really were in the play by Shakespeare. Oh, cool, said Annie. Then what? We play the magic whistle, said Jack. We sing about the sheep. We make them disappear like in Mary's stories, galloping and thundering. Augusta sees them. She's inspired. Our mission's done. Perfect, said Annie. Let's go. Jack and Annie hurried across the lane to the stone wall. Excuse me, Miss Augusta, said Annie. We just had a really great idea. Want to hear it? Augusta didn't answer. She kept staring at the ground. How would you like to see a play, said Jack. Augusta looked up. A play, she said. We would like to put our own play for you, said Annie. Why, said Augusta. Because it's really good, said Jack, and maybe it will prove to you that we really were in a play by Shakespeare. Augusta looked doubtful. Come on, you'll love it, said Annie. Do you know a quiet spot where no one can bother us? Augusta bit her lip and looked around. Then she stood up. All right, she said. They're over near the old forest. I used to go there with my brothers. Great, said Annie. Jack and Annie followed Augusta through this rain-soaked, misty forest. They walked past grazing sheep, then down the slope toward the wide rushing river. The river separated the sheep's meadow from an old forest. Jack could barely see the trees through the ghostly fog. Augusta stopped on a low bridge above the river bank near some large rocks. Here, she said. Good, those rocks can be our stage, said Jack. Jack and Annie climbed the pile of small boulders and stood on a large flat rock. Okay, said Annie. The name of this play is A Late Winter Daydream. Not bad, thought Jack. And this is what's going to happen, said Annie. Jack will be the narrator. I'll play the Irish whistle, and Jack will sing a song that tells the story. What? Said Jack. Excuse me a minute, Augusta. Jack turned to Annie. Why me sing? He whispered. Why not I play and you sing? No, I want to play, said Annie. You took notes at at Mary's, right? So just say a few words to describe the scene. Then use the notebook about the she to make up a song. You can do that, can't you? I guess, said Jack. Cool, said Annie. Give me the whistle. Jack reached into his pocket and pulled out his notebook and the Irish whistle. He gave the whistle to Annie. Sorry, Miss Augustus, said Annie. We're almost ready. She whispered directions to Jack. Okay, say your introduction. I'll start to play. Then you'll start to sing. Then, I've got it, said Jack. Let's just start. Jack and Annie turned to face Augusta. Jack cleared his throat. Then he spoke in a loud voice. All is still in an old forest until music sounds from a hidden world. Jack nodded at Annie. Annie raised the magic Irish whistle to her lips and began to play. Strange, sweet music came up from the whistle. The music was both happy and sad. It was full of beauty and hope, pain and sorrow. Like the fog over the river, the music seemed to blend everything together. For a moment, the whistle music was so powerful that Jack couldn't sing. He felt like crying and laughing at the same time. Finally, he looked down at his notes and began to sing. In the shining of light in a cloud like a dream, a bridge appeared over a wide flowing stream. Jack surprised himself. He thought the words for the song sounded pretty good. A long, fluttering high note burst from Annie's whistle. Bright dancing light flowed across the river. The light arched through the fog toward Jack, Annie, and Augusta. Augusta gasped. Jack looked down at his notes and sang. Some came on horses, some came on wings. From an enchanted world, little queens, little kings. The wind began to blow. Jack looked up. Leaves and grass and twigs were flying everywhere. The whistle music grew wilder. Thundering and rumbling sounds came from the forest. A herd of very small white horses galloped out of the mist. On their backs were proud and lovely riders. Men in gold helmets, women with long hair floating in the wind. Their capes and gowns were the colors of nature, the pale rose of the spring dawn, the green of summer hummingbirds of blue, the blue of the winter twilight, and the gold of the autumn leaves. The she! Cried Augusta. Chapter 7. Willie. Hundreds of she swarmed over the bright bridge. Beyond the galloping riders, more she came fluttering on wings like butterflies. Augusta stood up as if she were in a trance. Her hands clasped over her heart. Oh, wow, breathed Annie. Keep playing, shouted Jack. Annie blew on the whistle again. The she flew and galloped all along the wide grassy bank. Their horses, fleet as the wind, had arched necks and flaming eyes. They moved faster and faster, swirling into a blinding circle of light and color. The soaring sounds of the music inspired Jack to soar with the words too. He looked at his notebook and sang. In a swirl they leave, so wild and free, with a lonely girl to the hill of the she. Jack, no, shouted Annie. A mighty blast of wind nearly blew Jack and Annie off the rock. They crouched down and covered their heads. When the wind calmed down, they stood up, just in time to see the swirling cloud of light vanish back into the old forest. The she were gone. Once again the sky blended with water and earth in a veil of silver mist. Phew, Jack said breathlessly. That was amazing. Jack, do you know what you just did? Yeah, I made the she appear and disappear, said Jack. I used my notes from Mary's stories, just like we planned. Yes, you did that, said Annie. And you made Augusta disappear, too. What, said Jack? The she took Augusta, said Annie. I tried to stop you, but it was too late. You'd already sung those words. What words, said Jack? You sang, in a swirl they leave so wild and free, with a lonely girl to the hill of the she, said Annie. I was just reading my notes, said Jack. They took Augusta. Are you sure? Yes, she's gone, said Annie. Oh, no, said Jack. He and Annie ran to the bridge over the river. Augusta, he shouted. There's no sign of Augusta's red cape anywhere. See, she's gone, said Annie. It's all my fault, said Jack. You cannot help yourself, said Annie. But I'm responsible, said Jack. You have to get her back. Maybe Mary can help us, said Annie. Wait, listen to Jack. What's that sound? Squeaky noises were coming from behind the pile of small boulders. It sounded as if someone was trying to play the whistle, but the sound was definitely not magic. The whistle! I must have dropped it, said Annie. Maybe it's Augusta, said Jack. Jack and Annie ran back to and looked over the rocks. A man no higher than Jack's knee was blowing into the whistle. The man wore a green jacket and a three-cornered red cap with a white feather. He had big ears, a bushy red beard, skinny little legs, and silver buckles on his shoes. Oh, man, said Jack. A leprechaun, whispered Annie. Jack and Annie just stared at the leprechaun as he blew on the whistle. His small bony fingers danced over the six holes, but only squeaks, chirps, and hollow tweeting sounds came out. The leprechaun blew harder and harder. Then he stopped. He turned the whistle over and looked at it closely. He shook his head and frowned. Hello, said Annie. The leprechaun jumped and looked up. Well, hello yourself, he said, grinning. You startled me. Here, take this back. It's no use to me, as you can plainly hear. The little man held out the whistle. Jack reached over the rock and took it. He slipped it back into the pocket of his coat. Listen, we need your help, said Jack. Our friend? Oh, you humans, always such in a hurry, the leprechaun said. Sorry, said Jack, but we really need you to help us. You see, first of all, who are you? The leprechaun asked. I'm Jack. She's my sister Annie, said Jack. A friend? Ah, well then. Jack and sister Annie. I'm Lily, said the leprechaun. Now let's get a few things straight right away. Never call me Little Willie or Tiny Willie. I don't like it. And never, ever call me Wee Willie. That's the one I hate the most. Okay, fine, said Jack, but let me handle this, said Annie. She turned to the leprechaun. Willie, why didn't you go back over the river with the sheep? Ask me why I came over the river in the first place, and I'll tell you the answer to both questions, said Willie. Okay, why did you come over the river in the first place, Willie? And why didn't you go back across with the sheep, said Annie. Answer number 1. I was having a bit of a nap in the reeds when I heard your whistle playing, said Willie. Before I knew it, I was moving with the sheep across the bridge. Probably you didn't see me, lost in the swirl of things. I was... Excuse me, started Jack. I've heard some good whistle playing, Willie said, but yours, missy, was like none I've ever heard from a human, not in the 900 years of my life. So, answer number 2. I didn't go back over the river because I wanted to find out the secret of your playing. Well, that's easy, said Annie. The whistle played itself. It wasn't me. Ah, you're a modest girl, said Willie. And you like to keep the secrets of your talents to yourself? Not really, Stanley. Listen, Willie, Jack broke in. Can you help us? We lost her. Our friend Augusta. It was my fault. I sang about a lonely girl then she was taken by the sheep. Yes, I saw that, said Willie. Whisked away she was. So I'm guessing now you want me to help you get find her? Is that it? Yes, that's it, said Jack. We were going to ask Mary Sheridan to help us, said Annie, but you probably know the way better and... Wait a minute, said Willie. Did you say Mary Sheridan? You know Mary? Said Annie. Know her, said Willie, grinning from ear to ear. Why, if I were 4 feet taller, I'd married her years ago. Really, said Annie? Ah, yes. We're very good friends, said Willie. You see, I live in what you might call the in-between. I have 1 foot in the magical world of the sheep and 1 foot in the mortal world of humans, like Mary. Ah, lovely Mary. Yeah, Mary's great, said Jack. But now you want me to guide you to your missing friend, said Willie. Right, said Jack. I can do that, but what will you give me for it, said Willie. What do you mean, asked Jack. What will you give me for helping you find your friend? My time is very valuable. You know, said Willie. We can't really have anything, said Jack. We're poor and miserable, said Annie. I can see that, said Willie. All right, then, how about this? I'll lead you to your friends, and you'll teach me how to play the whistle the way you play it. Fair enough? Sorry, said Annie. Deal, Jack broke in. Jack, said Annie. Annie, it's a deal, said Jack. He was ready to promise anything to save Augusta. Good, said Willie. I'd love to play like that for Mary someday. Now the path I'm going to show you is very, very secretive. You mustn't never show another living soul. Of course not, said Jack. Then come with me, said Willie, and I'll lead you across the water to the home of the sheep. Chapter 8. The Hollow Hill. The leprechaun scrambled down the steep bank of the river. Jack started to follow, but Annie grabbed him. Jack, the whistle won't work for Willie, she said. I know, said Jack. We'll worry about that later. Right now, we just have to save Augusta. Come on. Jack and Annie hurried after Willie to the wide rushing river. How do we get across, said Jack. Follow me along the river, said Willie, and I'll show you. Step lightly. Willie skipped ahead of them along the river. Jack and Annie followed. Jack tried to step lightly, but it was impossible to. Slapping through the mud, his boots filled with ooze, and made squishing sounds with every step. The river grew narrower and narrower, twisting and turning like a snake. The mist grew thicker until Jack could hardly see a thing. He bumped into Willie, almost knocking him over. Careful, laddie, said the leprechaun. Sorry, said Jack. All right, said Willie. Here's the way to cross. Hop from this one stone after me. Willie disappeared into the mist, crossing the river. Annie followed him. Jack started to cross too. He tried to hop carefully from stone to stone, but the stones were too slippery. On the third hop, his boot slipped over the moss and over a mossy rock, and he splashed into the freezing water. Jack, are you okay? Annie called in a loud whisper. Yeah, I'm fine, said Jack. He scrambled up. His clothes were soaked and heavy. He really was miserable now. He waded to the other end of the river and joined Annie and Willie. Ah, you fell in, said Willie. That happens sometimes. Come with me now, into the forest. Jack, Annie, and Willie walked under the trees. They passed old oaks and maples that creaked in the wind. Jack shivered in his soaking wet clothes. A big black crow called from a high bare branch. Willie jumped, then laughed. Ah, 'tis probably Patrick Daly, he said. Remember she changed him in a crow for stealing a pair of High Queen's shoes. Changed him into a crow, said Jack. Willie nodded. One of the she's favorite tricks, he said, changing humans into displease them into animals. Oh, said Jack. A white rabbit scampered over the forest. That bunny over there is no doubt the former Mrs. Shan McCarty. She was rude to the High King, said Willie. Rude to the High King, said Jack. He was starting to feel like he was trapped in a nightmare. The she cannot bear the rudeness of the human, said Willie. Look there, he pointed to a fawn peeking out from behind a fir tree. Ah, it's so cute, said Annie. Cute? Maybe, maybe not, said Willie. Could easily be old John Foley. I heard that he was changed for being a grouch. Come along. Willie led Jack and Annie through the forest until they came to a tangle of berries and bramblers. The hollow tail of the she lies just beyond those thicket, he said. Do you still want to find your friend? Yes, said Jack and Annie. Then off you go, and good luck to you, said Willie, tipping his hat. What, you weren't coming with us? Said Jack. Oh, my no, said Willie. The she would be furious if they knew I'd shown humans the path there to the secret place, and I certainly don't want to live the rest of my life as Weasel. But won't they be angry at us for finding their secret hiding place, said Jack? Possibly, said Willie. Here's what I recommend you to do. Polite tell the High King and the High Queen that you've come looking for your dear friend to take her back to her loving family. The she placed very great value on friendship and family. Okay, said Jack. Friendship, family, and remember, be simple, direct, and honest all the time, said Willie. Simple, direct, honest, repeated Jack. And polite, that's the most important. Very, very polite, said Willie. Very polite, said Annie. Got it. Another thing, said Willie. In the world of the she, the old tales still live. Do not be afraid if you see odd sights floating about. They're just bits and pieces of the old story. Now go in, simple, direct, honest, and polite, and save your dear friend before she's lost forever. Thanks, Willie, said Annie. Best of luck, said Willie. See you later, said Jack. Hey, I'll be waiting for you, said the leprechaun. Jack and Annie crouched down and staggered through the thicket. The thorns and briars pulled on their wet coat. They scratched his hands and got caught in his hair. Jack battled his way through the tangled brush until he caught up with Annie. They both pushed their way through the thicket and stepped into a glade. Wow, it's like Mary said, whispered Annie. It is like summer here. No rain fell, no wind blew. Warm sunshine shone on the emerald green glade. In the middle of the glade was a large grassy mound. At the foot of the mound was a small doorway framed with stones. That must be it, the hollow hill, said Jack. The secret home of the she. That must be someone from an old story, whispered Annie. She pointed to a woman floating above the green mound. The woman wore a wreath of flowers on her head and carried a branch with silver apples. She vanished into the sunny haze. Whoa, whispered Jack. A small sailing ship then appeared in the air. It had white sails and flags flying. The ship too vanished. Then an old woman spinning at a spinning wheel appeared. Then a wispy dragon. Then a knight with a sword. The parade of images faded into the sunshine with the wisps of smoke. Phew, said Jack. Listen, said Annie. The sounds of drumming were coming from the doorway of the grassy mound. Come on, let's look inside, said Annie. Jack and Annie stepped close to the small doorway. It was no higher than Jack's waist. He and Annie knelt down and peeked inside. The hollow hill was filled with a pale green light. Very small dancers, none more than 8 inches high, were bathed in the light. As drummers pounded tiny drums, the dancers danced together in rows. They held their arms straight by their sides and nipped their legs and turned around and around to the rhythm of the drum. A small shining couple sat on the golden chairs watching the dancers. They wore golden crowns. They must be the High King and the High Queen, whispered Annie. Jack and Annie watched until the rows of dancers parted. Then they could see a third person watching the dance. She was no taller than the dancers. Draped around her shoulders was a red cape. It's Augusta, said Annie. Chapter 9. Skunks or Weasels. Augusta, whispered Jack. She's tiny. They must have shrunk her, whispered Annie. Hide, whispered Jack. He crawled away from the door. Annie crawled after him. They pressed their backs against the grassy mound. Why are we hiding, asked Annie. We can't let them see us, said Jack. They might shrink us too. But how are we going to save Augusta? Asked Annie. I don't know, said Jack. Hey, I just remembered something, said Annie. Doesn't Mary say the girl in her story would become small if she got inside the hollow hill? Yeah, she did, said Jack. So maybe that means you can only get shrunk if you go inside. Right, said Annie. So let's go back to the doorway and call from the outside. We'll be simple, direct, honest, and very polite, like Lily said. We'll tell the Queen and Queen we've come to take our friend back to our family. But wait a minute, said Jack. How can she go back to normal life with her family if she's only 8 inches tall? Good point, said Annie. This is so weird, said Jack. Let's worry about her size later, said Annie. For now, we just have to help her escape. Right, said Jack. Let's try it. Jack and Annie crawled to the entrance of the hollow hill and peeked inside. In the pale green light, a very small Augusta stood watching the dancers. Excuse us, please, Annie called. The drumming stopped. The dancers froze. All eyes turned to Jack and Annie. The High King and High Queen looked startled. Who are you? The king called. How did you find us? That's not important, said Annie. We're very sorry to bother you, but we've come to get our dear friend Augusta. We have to take her home to her very loving family. Please, thank you, added Jack, trying to be polite. Before the king or queen could speak, Augusta rushed forward. No, I don't want to go home, she screamed in a high little voice. I don't want to leave the she. Whoa, said Jack. That was a surprise. Maybe Augusta was under a spell. Leave here at once, the High King commanded Jack and Annie in a squeaky voice. You are not invited. You have no business here. Yes, we are leaving right away, but Augusta has to come too, Annie called. Thank you. She's right, said Jack. Augusta has to come with us, please. Thank you. No, I want to stay here, said Augusta. I'm not good for anything at home. Mary was right. I am not happy there. Jack was amazed. Augusta wasn't under a spell. She really wanted to stay with the she. The girl will stay with us, the High King shouted. Go now, now. No way, Jack blurted. We won't leave without Augusta. The crowd gasped. What? Roared the High King. Sorry, said Jack. I meant you will pay for this rudeness, the king yelled. Before Jack and Annie could get away, the king thrust his arm out. Sparks flew from his fingertips and his tiny fingers. Suddenly, Jack and Annie couldn't move their arms or legs. The king kept pointing at them. Skunks, he shouted to the crowd, or weasels. Neither, please. Thank you, shouted Jack. He was glad he could still talk, but the crowd began to chant in strange high voices. Skunks! 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 The king nodded and raised both arms into the air. Jack was desperate. He didn't want to live the rest of his life as a skunk. Wait, please, Jack shouted. I'm sorry I was rude. Before you change us, I really need to tell Augusta something. Thank you. The king looked at Jack for a long moment. Then he lowered his arms. The crowd grew silent. Thank you, said Jack. Augusta, listen to me. You should go back home. You're good for lots of things back there. You're very kind, and Mary says that you have a brave heart and a fine mind. Those are really good things to have. Tears rolled down Augusta's cheeks. She shook her head. Listen to me, please, Jack went on. Mary says you're not happy, but some things do make you happy, Augusta. You said you feel close to nature. You said you love simple folk like Mary, and I know you love stories too. Mary said you remembered every story she told you. You used to tell them yourself, word for word. You have a great memory. He's right, Augusta, yelled Annie. Those are your gifts. You need to give your gifts to the world. Augusta was still for a moment. Then she shook her head. I want to stay, she said. You have had your say, the king shouted at Jack and Annie. Now prepare to become skunks. He raised his arms. Oh no, thought Jack. Wait, Vinvara, said the High Queen. The High Queen stepped closer to Augusta. The Queen wore a silver cloak that glittered with diamonds. She had jewels in her long red hair that shone like stars. In her clear voice she rang like a bell. I am Queen Anne of the Sidhe, she said. The boy says you love stories, and that you remember every story you heard. Is that true? Augusta nodded. Then listen to our story, said Queen Anne. All the Sidhe were very still, watching Augusta and the Queen. In the morning, out of the rosy sky in a windy light we came, said Queen Anne. We were tribes of supernatural people called the Tatha Di Dana. Strong, fearless, and noble we were. 5 roads carried our army through the wild wooden lands of Ireland, and for eons we ruled the Irish world. But then the humans came. Wild woods gave way to villages and pastures. Our tribes hid in the hollow hills, in ruined forts, and under the sea. Over time, we made ourselves smaller and smaller so we could more easily hide from the humans. Eventually, we became known as the Sidhe, and we were mocked as the wee folk of fairy. But in truth, we are the tribe of the great Tatha Di Danam, and we live in enchanted places like this one, protected by what is left of our magic. Do you understand? I do. Yes, breathed Augusta. Our stories are passed down for centuries in the old language of Ireland, but as old languages was replaced with English, the stories began to fade away, Queen Anne said. Go home now with your friends, human child. Go back for our sake. Seek out the old storytellers and ask them to tell you the tales of my people. Learn the old language, read the old manuscript, write our stories down and share them before they are lost completely. Share them with all people of Ireland and all the world. Will you do that for us? Will you give us your gifts to tell our stories and restore our dignity? Augusta's eyes shone. Yes, she said. Yes, I will do, yes. Good, then I will send you all swiftly home, said Queen Anne. She beckoned to a small dancer, who stepped forward with a tiny silver chalice. Sip the honey nectar of the Sidhe, said the High Queen. She took the chalice and handed it out to Augusta. Augusta took a sip. A second later, Jack felt cold wind and rain. He and Annie were standing on the bank of the river. Augusta was standing beside him. She was her normal size again. Chapter 10. Fare thee wells. Well, that was simple and direct, said Annie. Yeah, Jack felt dazed. Augusta looked at Jack and Annie. I saw them, she said, her eyes wide. I finally saw the Sidhe. I really saw them. She burst out laughing. Her laughter was so full of joy that Jack and Annie started laughing too. I saw them, Augusta kept repeating. I saw the Sidhe, and now I have important things to do. Yes, you do, said Annie. I must learn the old language, and I must start gathering stories at once. That's what Queen Anne told me, said Augusta. I can't wait to visit the old storytellers. There's Mary Sheridan and Biddy Early, too. I'll start with Mary. Let's go see her right now. Hurry. Will you come with me? Hurry. Sure, said Annie, but just a second. She turned to Jack. What about Willie? Who's Willie? Asked Augusta. A friend of ours, said Jack, looking around. He said he would wait for us, but where was he going to wait? Willie! Willie! Called Annie. I guess he's still somewhere on the other side of the river, said Jack. That's too bad, said Annie. Yeah, said Jack. Come, let us go see Mary now, said Augusta, grabbing Annie's hand and pulling her along. Jack looked around for Willie one last time. He was sad about not seeing the leprechaun again, but he was also a little relieved. He knew they couldn't keep their part of the deal, teaching Willie how to play the magic whistle. Come on, Jack, cried Augusta. Jack followed the two girls through the wet meadow, over the stone wall, down the dirt lane, and across the muddy fields to Mary Sheridan's cottage. Mary, Mary, Augusta called. She dashed ahead of Jack and Annie. She didn't even stop to knock. She threw open the door to the cottage. Oh, she said, freezing in her tracks. Jack and Annie caught up with Augusta and looked inside. Mary was sitting in front of a fire. Next to her was a small man wearing a green jacket and a three-cornered red hat with a white feather. Willie, cried Annie. Annie and Jack hurried past Augusta into the cottage. You're here, said Jack. Of course. I said I'd wait for you, said the leprechaun. I see you have found your dear friend and brought her home. Good work. Augusta stood in the doorway gaping at Willie. Who are you? She asked. Name's Willie. Just plain Willie, said the leprechaun. I usually leave before you visit Mary, but now that you've seen the sheet, I suppose there's no point from hiding you anymore. Are you real? Asked Augusta. Who knows, said the leprechaun. Maybe I'm real, and you're not. Depends on which one of us is asking the question. Everyone laughed. Good point, said Annie. Well, we better get going home, said Jack. He wanted to leave before Willie asked Annie for the whistle lesson. Jack shook Annie's hand and started backward toward the door. Thanks for helping us, Willie, he called. Yeah, and thanks for Mary for everything, said Annie, waving. Goodbye, Augusta. Goodbye, everyone. Wait just a minute, my friend, said Willie. Uh-oh, thought Jack. Have you forgotten your deal, said Willie. My fingers are itching to make beautiful music for Mary. Well, you see, there's a problem with that, said Jack, squirming. A frown crossed Willie's face. A problem, he said. How could there be a problem? Find your friend, teach Willie to play the whistle. Doesn't get any simpler than that. Right, said Jack. So what's the problem, said Willie. Well, the whistle, said Jack. Jack didn't know how to finish. I'll answer the question, said Annie. Well, I'm going to be simple and direct and honest with you. Yes, said the leprechaun. Merlin the magician gave us the whistle to help us on our mission, said Annie. The whistle is magic, and the magic only works once. Without the magic, I don't know really how to play, so I can't teach you. There you have it. Ah, said Willie. He looked at the floor and shook his head. Then I'm afraid I'm going to have to turn you both into chipmunks. What? Said Jack. Willie burst out laughing. Joking, only joking, he said. Merlin, you should have told me that in the first place. Do you know Merlin? Asked Jack. Ah, yes, we spent a great deal of time together. Must be about 800 years ago now, said Willie. How is he? He's happy, said Annie. Good. Willie turned it back to Mary and Augusta. I first met the master magician on the Isle of Merlin in the Irish Sea. Wait, please, Willie, said Augusta. Mary, do you have a pen and paper? No, my dear, I'm afraid I don't, said Mary. I can help, said Jack. He took the pencil and notebook out of his pocket. He tore some of the clean pages out of his notebook. Then he gave the pencil and pages to Augusta. There, he said. Oh, thank you, Jack, said Augusta. She turned back to Willie. Continue, please. Well, said Willie, Merlin was only a few centuries old, and I was a mere lad. As Willie told the story, Augusta began to write. Jack put his notebook back into his pocket and nodded to Annie. She nodded back, and the two of them started toward the door. Just as they were about to leave, Annie called out to the others. Bye! We have to go home now, said Jack. Trip lightly, said Willie. Thanks for everything, said Augusta. 120 fare thee well, said Mary. Same to you guys, said Jack. Then he and Annie slipped out of the cottage. The rain was pouring again and the wind was blowing hard. I think we inspired Augusta, said Annie. Yep, we accomplished our mission, said Jack. Now let's get out of here. He couldn't wait to go home and get dry and warm. Jack and Annie ran inside against the wind. They climbed over the stone wall, then hurried up the lane, slipping and sliding in the muck. They ran across the soaked field. By the time they arrived at the rope ladder, their clothes were caked with mud. Jack and Annie climbed into the treehouse. Annie found the Pennsylvania book in the corner. As rain blew through the window, she pointed to the picture of Frog Creek Woods. I wish we could go there, she said. The wind blew harder. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster, then everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 11, Lady Gregory. Ah, sunshine, said Jack. He closed his eyes and felt the sunshine streaming through the treehouse window. And clean, dry clothes, murmured Danny. She placed the Pennsylvania book back in the corner. Jack took the magic whistle out of his pocket and placed it next to the book. There, let's go home now, he said. I want to look at the internet for information about Augusta. He started down the rope ladder. Great idea, said Danny, following Jack. Can you find out what happened to her? Jack and Danny ran through the chilly Frog Creek woods. They crossed the street and hurried up the sparkling sidewalk to the yard. They tramped over the old snow up to the porch. Annie opened the front door and led the way inside. Hi, Jack called. We're back. Hi, the mom called from the kitchen. Did you have a nice break? Yes, we did, said Annie. Good. Get back to your homework now, said their mom, so you can finish in time to go to the theater. Okay, called Annie. She went to the computer desk and sat down. What should I type? She asked Jack. Jack pulled up a chair and sat beside her. Well, we don't know her last name, he said, so just try Galloway, Augusta, and Irish Stories. And he typed these words on the keyboard, then hit enter. There were lots of choices for different websites, and he clicked on the first one. On the screen was a black and white photograph of a woman. The caption under it said, Lady Augusta Gregory. Look, it's her, said Annie. The woman on the screen was middle-aged, but she looked like Augusta. Her hair was parted neatly down the middle. Jack read that aloud from the screen. Lady Augusta Gregory was born in a wealthy family in Galloway, Ireland in 1852. She wrote over 40 plays and many poems and essays. She was a co-founder of the Abbey Theatre, the National Theatre of Ireland. Lady Gregory also learned the old language of Ireland and became well known for collecting Irish stories and legends and sharing them with the world. Wow, said Annie. Augusta did have a brave heart and a fine mind. And she must have liked our play, since we wrote 40 of her own and started their own theater. Her own theater? Yeah, said Jack. She really turned out great. This reminded him of a question he asked himself earlier. I wonder what I'm good for. I don't know how to do anything on that Irish farm. Me neither, said Annie. But hardly any kids today know how to do kinds of stuff like that. So what would we do if all of our machines and computers broke down, said Jack. We'd have to figure out how to grow potatoes and make our own clothes and milk cows, said Annie. I'd probably read some kind of instructions first, then give it a try, said Jack. I'd probably give it a try first, said Annie, then read the instructions. Jack laughed. I know some stuff we're good for, said Annie. What, said Jack. First, we're good for helping each other, said Annie. Yeah, but, said Jack. No, really, we help each other out all the time. That's true, said Jack. And we're good for helping Augusta, said Annie, and helping Louis Armstrong, Mozart, and Leonardo da Vinci. We put a smile on Mona Lisa's face, remember? Jack nodded. Yep, he said, and we're good for saving an orphan penguin, a huge octopus, the city of Tokyo, Venice, and New York, said Annie. We're good for rescuing baby gorillas from a leopard and school kids from a twister. We're good for helping Shakespeare, Clara Barton, and George Washington. We're good for rescuing 2 kids from a tsunami and a Lakota boy from a buffalo stampede and a baby kangaroo and a koala from a forest fire. We're good for... Wait, stop, said Jack, stop. But that's not even half of it, said Annie. I know, said Jack, but that's plenty. I'm inspired. I'm ready to write that story for homework. I'll use my own experience. I have a little more than I thought. Cool, said Annie. She went back to the computer to read about Lady Augusta Gregory. Jack grabbed the pencil and pulled out his notebook. He moved it to the couch and sat down. As late winter light slanted into the living room, he began to write. Bye, and thank you for reading Leprechaun in Late Winter by Mary Pope Osborne. Hope you can stay in tune for other Merlin Missions and Magic Treehouse series. Hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you, and good night.